Welcome to the Grief Ladies, the practical guide to what comes next. I'm Kelly Daugherty.
And I'm Karyn Arnold, and we are two grief professionals with over 50 years of combined experience. We're here to validate, educate, and give you tangible tools you can actually use.
Each episode motivates you to take action and reminds you it's okay to want to feel better. This is the Grief Ladies, a guide to what comes next.
Hi, and welcome. I'm Karyn here with Kelly, and we are the Grief Ladies. Here in the midst of the holiday season, we are talking about our grief framework, but specifically how it relates to the challenges of this time of year. So today we are at the letter I, which is for interacting, something that I don't know. I'll tell you what, no matter what group I do, no matter what the topic is, no matter what the loss is, it seems like in one way or the other, we always get to the other people, the challenges of conversations and the things that come up or don't. And one of those big things that people deal with a lot of times are the question, how are you? And we know that this is hard all the time, but at the holidays that you're going to find that there's just more opportunities to be asked, more opportunities to be asked for the first time because maybe you haven't seen somebody since the funeral or, since before all of this happened. So there can be a lot of landmines that people feel like they're walking into. So Kelly, what are some of your thoughts about the question, how are you, as it relates to a grieving person, maybe especially this time of year?
I think it's a loaded question for sure.
Yeah.
And I think people really struggle with it. My clients talk a lot about it because they feel sometimes that they have to really hold back from being honest about how they're actually feeling. And I think it's really about trying to make a decision about who you're interacting with and how much you want to share and how vulnerable you want to be. Because I personally believe that you shouldn't be vulnerable with everybody.
Mm.
I think we know we've been, everybody listening probably can think about times where they have been vulnerable and it's been used against them or it's been minimized or whatever. And so I believe that it's sometimes we have to choose who we can be vulnerable with. And I always talk about it. It's like kind of dipping your toe in the kiddie pool, the kiddie end of the pool. And like, okay, I share a little bit and then I see how they respond. And if they respond appropriately and well, and then I can maybe share a little bit more. But I also believe vulnerability builds trust. So it's layered here, I think. I think you have to decide, is this someone that deserves to hear your story,
Mm.
deserves to know how you're feeling? Or is this somebody that's just saying, how are you, just because that's what we say to each other, right? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well, that's what's hard about it because it really is a greeting now. I mean, it's kind of taken the place of hello, even sometimes. I mean, we know that because when I was at the food store last night, the person's running my thing, how are you? And we know the person doesn't actually expect an answer. So it does get really complicated, I think, sometimes. What's interesting, I find with the people I work with, especially individually, one of the first things I say is, kind of checking in and anything that's maybe happened since we talked last. But then I'll always say, like, how are you? And you can hear them like, and I say, well, remember, I'm actually asking. I really want to know, like, how are you really? And we have time for you to answer. But they don't feel that in other situations. What I say all the time, it's like this math that's happening in your head. Maybe you are at a get together and you see maybe someone who you like and do have a trust with, but you don't necessarily know what they're going to be like as far as the support for grief, because that's a whole different thing. And so I find a lot of times people are thinking like, okay, well, who's asking and do they really want to know and how much time do we have and do I really want to be sharing? Like those are all of the things that are one relatively, quote unquote simple question leads to this crazy exhausting thought process that a person has to go through before they can even begin to think of an answer. So I mean, one thing that I talk about with people is anticipating and trying to anticipate some of this and be prepared in some ways. Most of the time, not always, but I think we will have a sense of who's going to be where we're going, if we're going to like a family party, or even a gathering of friends, it's okay if you are familiar or close to the host to say, hey, who's going to be there? Just so you can have an idea of like what to expect. And you can say, oh, that person's really great. Actually, she's already reached out. So I'm going to kind of try and sit with her if I can. Or like, oh, there's that person that just always says the wrong things, even when everything's good. So I'm going to really try to maybe minimize conversation or ask my friend to come rescue me if they see me talking to them. Like, we can try to strategize a little bit, but I think another strategy is just to sort of try to have an answer ready. Um, and kind of have the same answer ready just to start, which something along the lines. I mean, one thing, and Kelly, I'm pretty sure you agree with me on this. Like, we don't want to say I'm fine. Like we don't want to do that. We don't want to give people the impression that we're fine because we keep telling people that they're going to stop asking, and then we're going to feel like we don't have support. So we want to feel like we're having an authentic interaction. We want to tell people, yeah, it's been hard, but it doesn't mean you have to give them all of the innermost thoughts of how horrible it can be at times. So, like, what do you think a person can say, Kelly, that would kind of be easy, something at the ready that would help them, without feeling like they have to give too much away, maybe?
Yeah. Well, this has been a difficult year, and I'm just taking it day by day,
Yeah.
or I'm doing the best I can given the circumstances.
Mhm.
Or, I always think, like, do you really want to know the answer? Because, I think it depends. And, if it is a family gathering, I think there's these layers here, right? Because sometimes family members may also be grieving. So that complicates it as well. Or the family members may have not been around, like you said, like these people that you haven't seen, maybe it's been 9 months since the services or whatever, and they haven't reached out once.
Right.
And so it can feel really hurtful walking into that situation and seeing them and them all of a sudden giving you that puppy dog look and being like, "How are you doing?"
Right.
And be like, "Well, screw you. Like, I haven't heard from you in 9 months." Like,
Yeah.
um, so I think, I think there's layers and maybe for some people it is, you know what? I'm okay. Or change or just go back to them. Well, how are you doing?
Right.
You
Well,
know?
that's a good point. It's definitely it's not we're not only gonna be with people who are outside of the grief. We're certainly gonna be with people who are experiencing this as well and maybe have been supportive or not supportive. I mean, there's so often family history and things that get amplified and complicated with loss. I've said a lot of times it seems like in these situations, there's the potential for a loss to make a close family much, much closer. But it's also a big chance of if there's some fracture in the family for it to really full out break,
Yeah.
and to really see those cracks even more. So not usually a lot of in between. So we can also be going in feeling defensive, hurt, protective, not necessarily knowing what to expect, and possibly resentful if someone does finally ask how we're doing. Like you said, like now you're asking me, So we want to do kind of try to be ready for that. But we do have to consider too how much energy we're going to be giving to another person through all of this because I don't know, I've said before that I think if we can understand that people are going to disappoint us through this process. And if we can make some peace with that being the nature of human beings and our interactions together too, I think sometimes we can realize like this is just all this person is capable of. I don't know, Kelly, we talked about this before. Someone said to me one time, you can't buy milk at the hardware store. That's like one of my favorite sayings that someone taught me. Like, don't go to the hardware store for milk. And it's like there are just certain people who can't give us what we need or what we want. And so we have to not expect that or look for that, or we're just going to always be disappointed too.
Do you think though, because I'm kind of thinking about some of my clients and even personally a little bit, that sometimes we spend so much time focusing on those hurts and those resentments of our expectations not being met. Do you think we ever do that as a bit of a way to avoid our grief?
Yeah. I mean, I think that that certainly makes sense. I think we will probably do just about anything to avoid it at times. And let's face it, what comes up with that stuff a lot of times anger. You and I have talked about that's a feels like a much safer emotion sometimes. I've said before like anger has a charge to it. It has an energy. Being sad just makes me tired and it just makes me want to sleep and it makes me want to check out from everything. But if I'm feeling kind of pissed off at someone, then I have like something to talk about and like, do you know what that person did? And even if that's just like energizing me in my head. Um, so I think that can be part of it. And like you said, I think it can be a distraction. I think it could just be a frustration. I think it's something else also that we could feel ourselves trying to change that we wish would change. But I do say to people, a lot of times we are devoting a lot of energy to people who are not standing in front of us, but it almost feels like they are because we are thinking about them and the hurt so much. And like, what would it look like for that not to be there?
Yeah. And if it wasn't there, what's left?
Right.
Then it is that grief, right?
Yeah.
So I do think I agree, like, that anger can fuel us and
Hmm.
keep us going sometimes, and it is also something to complain about and, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
which sometimes we like to do. Um, and we wanna be validated, right? We want people to show up for us, but I think we have these ideas of what that looks like, and we don't always communicate that
Right.
either.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because it's hard to, in the sense that we don't always know what we want. I've worked with people in the past, in couples actually, and as I'm talking to them, the person who's grieving is saying like, "Well, I just need more support," and the other person's like, "Okay, well, what do you need?" Because sometimes I make space to talk about it and it's like, "I don't wanna talk about it right now." "Okay, so we're not gonna talk
Mhm.
about it." But then I don't say anything and then it's like, "You're upset that I didn't say anything or I didn't bring it up." So those who actually are genuinely trying to support the person are probably also feeling kind of confused and they're just really not sure. And I think as grieving people, we can understand, yeah, I can sort of see why that would be because I don't always know if I feel like talking about it or not. That's why preparing ourselves for these conversations at holidays can be so hard because we don't know how we're going to feel in the
Yeah.
moment. It's not a bad idea, though, to have a couple of different scenarios at the ready. One of which, by the way, Kelly, and I've maybe talked about this before, but one of my favorite, if you will, only because it stands out. I had a woman who was going to a family reunion, and most of the people she hadn't either seen at all or hadn't seen since her mom died. And we spent an entire 1 hour session preparing her for all the conversations that she was going to have about her mom and her mom's loss. Next session, I talked to her, "How did it go?" And she started to laugh. She goes, "No one brought it up at all. No one said anything."
Yep,
And then it
yep,
was like, "Oh, yeah, that can happen too." And then it was all of that to sort of unpack, like, "Are you kidding me? This was my entire family. This is my first time seeing most of them, and nobody said anything?" Like,
yeah,
yeah, so I've
but
learned
I
the
think you
lesson
have
on
to
that one.
well, and you have to be prepared for that as well, because
Mhm,
that is very true, could very well happen.
exactly.
Um, and so, what do you think? Okay, so maybe you get through the "how are you?" and you give the blanket statement, whatever that is for you that works, that feels like you're being genuine and honest, but not giving it all out, not
Right,
just
right.
being totally open. And what if you get one of those cliched responses that doesn't seem to help, right? Well, he's in a better place, or time heals all wounds, or whatever those lovely cliched responses are. What then?
So that one I feel like maybe does need to depend a little bit on who it is that's saying it. Um, One, sometimes generationally understanding that maybe that's a response that has been typical for a very long time, and maybe a much older person just feels more comfortable saying those things. Um, I don't know. Maybe I guess I feel like I don't want to be too confrontational with someone who's much senior to me. Um, but I mean, so maybe that's just one example. But like if there was someone who I'm a little closer to, who I'm assuming I'm going to have future conversations with, maybe that's the other piece of it too. Like, how often am I going to talk to this person about it? If I really think this is probably the one and done, I'm not sure how much I would necessarily say something, but it is always okay, regardless of how we've judged it, to say, well, I appreciate that, but that's not actually how I feel about it or what's bringing me a lot of comfort right now. You can say that to anybody, but I think we'd probably feel more comfortable saying that with people who we think we're a little closer to or that we're going to talk to more often. What I don't know, Kelly, I've been hearing this a lot lately where and this one gets sensitive because there's a religious component to it, but I've a lot of times a grieving person will say to me that they'll say like, "Oh, I just wish my mom was here." And someone will gently say to them, "She's here. She knows. She can see it." Like you're like, "Oh, I wish she could see this. She sees it. She's here." And I have a lot of people like, "Yeah, that's just not helping."
No, I heard that. Yeah, that's it's because they're trying to make you feel better, right? They're
Yeah,
trying to give you some comfort. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but they have no idea what your beliefs are,
right.
right? And so they're making an assumption like that could be helpful. And for some, no, that's not true. That's not accurate. I don't think that. Um, but it's definitely one that I think comes up a lot and you do hear it. Like,
Well, and the thing is like I have people who say to me, listen, I do feel their presence. And maybe I do believe in the afterlife or heaven or something. Even if I do believe those things, the bottom line is that I am mourning their physical presence. And we cannot pretend that it's the same thing.
exactly.
And maybe sometimes when people say that, it almost feels like that's what they're doing. Like, this is your consolation prize. She's here.
Mhm.
She's
Oh,
here.
she's still with you, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
And
I'd rather have well, like, I always said when I was younger and after my mom died, they'd be like, "She's in a better place." I'd be like, "No, that better place is here with me." You
right.
know, like
Yeah. Yeah.
so it wasn't that I did not that was one of the ones that, really bothered me the most, I remember, and so, yeah, it's while that may be comforting, it's obvious we would all rather have our loved ones here physically with us.
Right. Right. It is that balance because, again, I think if we are trying to feel connected to them, then that thought is important. It's almost like I put it in the same category as if someone were to say, well, they wouldn't want you to be sad.
I was just gonna say that.
It's kind of that same thing, which is,
Exactly.
it's such a, I don't know. It's almost like a little bit of a contradiction because like it's not comforting to hear that usually from other people. Some people may be like, yeah, I heard that. That really helped. Maybe. I don't hear that too often. If someone says, oh, they wouldn't want you to be sad, they wouldn't want you to be struggling. What I hear from people is like, and what we talk about is if that comes from you, if if I'm, about to go through the holiday season and I'm just really struggling, if I can think to myself, they would want me to enjoy this. They would want me to be happy or they would want me to be present. Like if I can come up with that because that's my relationship with them and that's what I know about what we shared in our life together and that comes from me, that's one thing. But to make that suggestion from somebody else, it comes off so different. It just really, really does. So it's just interesting how it almost sometimes feels like the same thing, but it's not the same thing at all.
Mhm. Exactly. Yep, definitely not.
Yeah.
So it's I think you also kind of need to have, like you said, maybe that backup statement as well.
Yeah.
So you have your how are you statement and then also maybe that backup statement if there is something that's said that's not so helpful. And I also think it's important to kind of thinking about how can you get out of a conversation that isn't that is not helping,
Mhm.
and it's as simple as going to the bathroom.
I was thinking we're really on the same track today. I'm like picturing myself, "Excuse me, I'll be right back."
Exactly. Go to
Yeah.
the bathroom,
Mhm.
you know, um, and then you find someone else to go back to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, So, on our Facebook community that we have now, Karen, we had a topic that somebody wanted us to address when we talked about this interacting. And I think it's kind of in alignment with what we're talking about. And it's about how do you navigate these strained relationships that were previously strained before grief, but now how grief is just amplifying that hurt.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is, especially maybe in some family situations that maybe you have had a strained relationship with, and then you have the family gatherings where you have to see these people. I do think it magnifies it, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's for multiple reasons. I think sometimes it's just more fuel to add to the fire.
Right.
It just compounds it, right? Compounded grief. I think sometimes it's easier, again, going back to like focusing on is that resentment and that anger kind of helping you focus on that rather than your grief? Well, what do you think?
Are you ready to take the next step on your grief journey with real tools and compassionate guidance? The Grief Ladies are launching a brand new workshop series based on their signature grief GRIEF framework. 5 trail markers to help you find your footing after your loss: grounding, rebuilding, interacting, evolving, and finding. Each workshop focuses on one trail marker, guiding you through practical steps to move from surviving to living again, all in a space that's honest, supportive, and real. Led by grief experts Kelly Daugherty and Karyn Arnold, these workshops combine decades of experience with tools you can start using today. Visit griefladies.com to explore the upcoming workshops, because you don't have to climb this mountain alone.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I talk to people about with those situations is that how, we can all be related or we could all be impacted, but we all had very different relationships with the person who died. So we're being impacted differently. And it's important to recognize that. Um, I find that usually, unfortunately, like we were saying before, that this type of significant loss, it doesn't usually bring people together. It's probably more likely for everybody to be having their own hurt and going their own direction. I mean, honestly, even with, I have a friend who just lost her mom, and she's got a huge family, tons of siblings, and they get along great. And she was saying to me, even they are feeling like a little bit of tension. So it's just because there's the estate to be settled, and there's everybody's
Mhm.
different sadness and schedules and stresses and coping and history and all that other kind of stuff. So I guess what I would say is, or what I say to people most often, is that when things are particularly acute, and when everybody is really working through it, this is not the time to be also trying to mend and repair a family relationship. I almost feel like sometimes those things are better left on pause until everybody can have a little time to do some of their own healing, and then maybe have a little bit more clarity. Like, trying to fix family stuff in the middle of your own brokenness is really difficult to do. Um, and honestly, like, in the course of doing this work, you would think that our message would be like, time isn't promised to anybody and you've got to do everything today. I kind of end up saying, not that that's not true, but I'm like, give it a little bit of time. Give everybody a little bit of space. Give everybody a little bit of time. And it's amazing how sometimes that can help, for everybody to just take a breather. It's like, again, even under very good circumstances, there's been a huge shift in the family dynamics, and everybody's trying to figure out where they fit now and where they want it to be.
Yeah, and it's about, those boundaries. It's about keeping the boundaries and choosing maybe the boundaries have to be a little more tightened up right now, or you need a little more space from people.
Hmm.
And you know, it's just you have to just take it easy, I think sometimes, and be kind to get come back to that self-compassion and being kind to yourself because it absolutely grief just I think compounds everything, right?
Hmm.
Everything feels bigger and harder and more difficult. And so it's not surprising that it's gonna possibly, stir up old stuff with friends and family.
Yeah. And I don't know, a lot of times in estrangement, it usually means that you're not necessarily having holidays together. But if you really do have to be in the same spaces together, then I think, again, trying to find your allies. Um, Always trying to be kind. when you can,
Yeah.
because, usually if a person is hurting like that, what do they say? Hurt people hurt people. So they're, been hurt or feeling hurt, or they have their own reality of what's happened, how it's happened. Um, when I do talk about estrangement with people, sometimes I always say, well, what would their story be about this? And we don't think about that sometimes, but they have their own story of what they think went down, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. I
So
always say there's 2 sides to every story, and somewhere in the middle is the truth.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So, but again, is this what we need to be focusing on right now? Probably not. So it's just surviving those get togethers. Same advice: go late, leave early, find an ally. Just try and get through it as best you can.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes that's all we can do. I just spoke with someone. I did a session this morning, and she was talking about making something more bearable.
Mm.
She's like, I don't know if I can make it better, but I want to make it more bearable. And I was like, that's good.
I like that. I like that. Yes. How can we make it more bearable?
Yes. Yeah. And, we don't grow up thinking like, boy, I hope I have a life I can tolerate, or a life that's bearable. But in the midst of really, really tough times, if something can be more bearable, that's huge.
Yeah,
So just try and
exactly.
think of ways to maybe incorporate that this holiday season.
Yeah. So, as we end every podcast, we always have a bit of an actionable step for our listeners. And because, as we, do believe there are things that can help you. So, Karen, what do you think our actionable step for interacting right now during the holidays is for our listeners?
Well, I think just honestly, a little bit of anticipation and preparation doesn't have to be too big. I mean, if you're a person who writes in journals or something and you want to do that, but just taking like a quiet moment to just really think about, okay, what is the situation I'm walking into? Who am I going to be seeing? What do I feel ready to share? What is a response or two that I can have at the ready? And remember that we're doing this not to amplify the anxiety about it. We're actually being prepared is about making something more bearable. Like, I'm doing this now so that I can go and take a breath and say, I'm prepared for this. I've done
Yeah,
everything as much as I can, to prepare for it. So just a couple of little things to have at the ready. And then, make a plan too for the other side of it, to go home, put on your pajamas and be like, whew, okay, now I get to do what
I
I
did
want to
it.
do. Yeah.
I did it. Yeah, I got through it. I got
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Karen. And thanks to everyone for listening. And we hope that this holiday season is peaceful and gentle for you. And next week, we'll be back where we're talking about evolving and dealing with some of maybe those roadblock emotions like anger and guilt and fear and jealousy and all those not so fun ones. But
Yeah.
stay tuned.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks for joining us on the Grief Ladies.
Don't wait to feel better to get started. Getting started is what makes you feel better. Put this week's tool to work.
If today's episode helped, share it with someone who needs it and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you.
And remember, we're here for you, your trusted grief ladies, navigating this path together.